It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. The presidential panel probing the activities of Economic and Financial Crimes Commission on Thursday interrogated a group of operatives allegedly favored by the embattled, suspended chairman of the anti-graft agency, Ibrahim Magu. According to the published reports, the operatives have been accused of committing several atrocities, including blackmailing, extorting suspects, and appropriating exhibits to themselves and seizing of forfeited or seized assets without remitting the proceeds to government coffers. In the meantime, Justice Ayo Salami-led panel is now trying to establish if indeed Mr. Magu bought property abroad, particularly in Dubai, where he was said to have traveled to several times on official and private visits. He is also alleged to have sold off or released about 157 oil tankers without following due process. The vehicles are said to have been seized by the Port Harcourt Zonal Office of the Commission. The report of the Auditor General of the Federation last year noted that about 14 billion naira reported as salaries and wages in the consolidated financial statement of EFCC are not in the anti-graft agency's trial balance submitted for reconciliation. The panel is also investigating allegations that 39 billion naira had been diverted from the recovered loot. What is happening? All of this still remains in the realms of, what should I call this now? Should I say speculations? Or should I say these are evidences? Or should I say these are facts?
Investigations.
Investigations. All of these are still the realm of the investigations. But what is really happening? I mean, if this is anything to go by, it just brings to fore the rot in our system. Tundun.
It's dreadful. I mean, these are allegations so far, but the allegations are grave and they're really quite shocking. And just the extent of the hypocrisy, arresting people, dragging other people to the courts over corruption, and now look at what's been uncovered. But it remains to be confirmed in any way. But even the fact that these are alleged, and it just goes to show, I mean, these are not a few million here and there that somebody pocketed. This is a multi-billion naira operation. Why was it allowed to go on for so long unchecked? Why is it that this is just happening now? This is what I want to know. Because I want to go back to that allegation of the power play. And there's some theories that a certain powerful backer who was behind Magu, since his demise, this is what has now happened. So does that mean that if that gentleman did not pass on, all of this would have just gone undiscovered and people would have gotten away with this? I mean, it's really alarming. And yesterday, somebody on the show was asking about Mr. Olukoyede, the secretary of the EFCC. It was you. Yeah. Well, now we know where he is. He's one of these people being quizzed. Wow. It's horrendous.
Dr. Abati,
well,
is this not more painful?
Some of the important details that have emerged in the last 24 hours. One, the point you are making about, the former backer of the EFCC chairman. Obviously, you are referring to Abati, the former chief of staff.
I'm feeling discreet this morning.
And the way it has worked out is that some analysts are saying that perhaps what we're seeing is the influence of Professor Ibrahim Gambari, the new chief of staff, who we're told is trying to reset the Nigerian presidency and ensure that things that have been swept under the carpet are brought to the fore. That's a plausible leg of the analysis. The second point is that the investigating panel, led by Justice Ayo Salami, yesterday invited 7 senior officials of the EFCC, including Olanipekun Olukoyede, the secretary of the commission, to provide within 7 days evidence of how recovered loot were managed. And I think that that will be of great interest to Nigerians. The third issue to also pay attention to is a protest from the Vice President's office about allegations against him, which had been in the public domain and which had gone viral on social media, that he collected 4 billion naira from an alleged looted 39 billion naira. And in fact, he has taken the additional step of asking that the Inspector General of Police should probe the matter, and has asked also his lawyer, Professor Taiwo Oshipiton, SAN, to sue Jackson Ode, who is said to have been the person who made the allegation on social media. And I think it's important that the Vice President of Nigeria is alleging injury to his reputation, accusing Jackson Ude, the publisher of Point Blank News, of defamation, and insisting on the protection of his integrity. I think all of this is important. These are issues that we should note and that may be of interest in days to come. However, everyone should note the fact that the presidency has not so far made any categorical statements on this particular matter, other than just saying that what they have done is to indicate that nobody is a sacred cow in the government, and that this is pursuant to the administration's commitment to the anti-corruption campaign. But whatever happens at the end of the day with these allegations against the chairman of the EFCC, two things should be noted. One, there is going to be very heavy collateral damage for the Buhari administration.
How so?
Because, look, many people will end up with the analysis that it is curious that a man that was rejected by the Senate, acting appointment was not confirmed, has now turned out to confirm the suspicions of the leadership of the Senate under Dr. Saraki. And, of course, a lot of people are already saying that. But how it is handled is the second leg of it. Whatever way they handle it will also have implications for President Buhari's legacy. The other issue to raise is that yesterday, in the course of yesterday, the matter was put before the public by Olusegun Adeniyi, my friend and brother. He's older than me by just 24 hours, that he likes to push the point. You know, he had written an alleged that Ibrahim Magu had gone after General Danjuma and also asked that the house of General Abdul Salami Abubakar be searched. But the two statesmen, General Danjuma and General Abubakar, have already issued statements to say that, look, this has nothing to do with them. So a lot of conspiracy theories are beginning to emerge, but I think that we should all be mindful of the fact that the Justice Ayo Salami panel has not said a word. I've not seen any statement from that panel.
Well,
I guess at the end of the day, that panel will issue a report, present the facts, the details, and that's what all of us can rely on as redoubtable evidence of whatever has transpired. But for now, there's a lot of speculation out there, and that's why I keep arguing that we should avoid the error of trial by media.
Which is why I wasn't naming any names. But I wanted to say a lot of us, myself included, were indignant about the Abacha loot and the strings attached, the conditions given to return our money to us. But when you see things like this is why. How allegedly recovered loot gets relooted. This is why we're treated in that fashion.
And that's why I see this as a very, very, very shocking moment in our national life.
It's embarrassing.
Because I can't just believe that. And I wanted to raise the issue of legitimacy, that Mr. Magu doesn't even have the legitimacy to be there in the first place, because it wasn't confirmed.
No, that matter had been determined by Justice Ijoma Ojukwu. Yeah. Because, you know, the matter was taken to court, whether he could continue to act in acting capacity. And, you know, Justice Ojukwu ruled that indeed he could continue to act. So that's a settled matter. Well, that's the position of the law.
Thank you, Dr. Abati.
But in my eyes?
Well, that's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have the trio of Rotus, Odiri, Michael Wilson, and Aaron Akirijala to give us updates on Africa and global business and COVID-19. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our ever-dependable Rotus Odiri is now here to give us Africa Business Update. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Tundun. Good morning, Rufai. I hope everyone's doing good. Yes, so we kick off with the Minister of State for Petroleum, Mr. Timipre Silva. He put out a press release over the last 24 hours trying to make an emphatic statement about deregulation and the federal government's position with regards to that. And he wanted to make certain things clear. So it was kind of a long press statement, but we've broken it down into 2 quotes. So I think we can get the first quote one here. So, yeah, after a thorough examination of the economics of subsidizing PMS or domestic consumption, government has concluded that it was unrealistic to continue with the burden of subsidizing PMS to the tune of trillions of naira every year. And go to the second quote. It says deregulation means that the government will no longer continue to be the main supplier of petroleum products, but will encourage private sector. This is key, encourage the private sector to take over the role of supplying petroleum products. So there's a cost to that, and hopefully, I'm very hopeful that we're going to have him on the Global Business Report at 3 p.m. today. Things change. He's a busy man, but we hopefully have a commitment for him to be there. So I want to ask him about a lot of things: the petroleum industry bill, the safety regulations regarding COVID-19 at fuel stations. We talked about the fuel station in South Africa that was using technology, contactless payments in order to allow or facilitate people buying fuel, not having to touch the POS. I want to ask him about renewable energy. I want to ask him about the refineries. Are we putting all our hope in Dangote to produce, to give refined fuel for Nigeria? I want to ask him about safety. There was a company whose FPSO suffered a kidnapping attack on the 2nd of this month. So the unrest in the Niger Delta. So lots of questions for the minister, and we're looking forward to having him. So hopefully all our viewers can tune in at 3 o'clock for that interview. Moving on to South Africa. Manufacturing outputs for April fell by 49.4%. This is the manufacturing output for South Africa. And I think we have a chart showing, yeah, look at that. So I circled that in red. If you look at that, 49.4 with regards to where it dropped. I mean, think of anything on your desk, whether it's a newspaper or a pen, and hold it and say, if you can produce 100 units of that item in fiscal year 2019, and the following year you suffer almost a 50% drop, that is half of your output. Now, you have to remember that for manufacturing companies in South Africa, they've got fixed costs. They've got variable costs. There's also the matter of inflation that, adds to their costs. Of course, inflation in South Africa, I believe, is about single digits, 5 or 6% right now. But still, when you think about the amount of pressure on the manufacturing sector in the country, this output figure was pretty ugly. Also, factory production fell by 44% month on month. Again, that 49% figure was year on year in April. For factory production was down by 44% month on month, and then the 3 months up until April, factory production down by 16%. So variable, all the figures pretty much show that the COVID-19 pandemic has really, really hammered the South African economy with regards to their output. Still in South Africa, I moved to airlines, South Africa Airways. There was a victory that was recorded by the unions with regards to, we have a tweet actually from the executive secretary of NUMSA. His name is Reuben. Yeah, there we go. Lots of acronyms, so I'll explain all this here. But he says NUMSA and SACCA secured victory once more against the BRPs. The reserve judgment by Labour Appeal Court is out. The Labour Appeal Court ruling is clear, and the bottom line is that BRPs can't retrench workers without first producing a business plan. So NUMSA is the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, and there they are, powerful union. And then there's the SACCA, which is the South African Cabin Crew Association. And BRPs is a business restructuring practitioner. So business restructuring practitioners come into play when a company, like South African Airways, goes into administration and they have to do restructuring. Restructuring, of course, means that you've got to cut costs. So what they tried to do was try to lay off workers, but the courts, South Africa's labor law says you have to give a 2-month consultation period where you present a business plan, a rescue plan for the entity within whose costs you're trying to reduce by laying off workers. So the courts ruled in favor of the unions that, listen, BRPs, before you retrench any workers, you must follow the law. So they tried to appeal, and the appeal was rejected, and so that's why he's celebrating there. But South African Airways still has issues. I mean, for now, it looks like they're going to get the help that they need, but that help is coming from the states whose revenues have been compressed because of the COVID-19 pandemic and what it's meant for, how it's impacted their economy. Moving on from there to Botswana. There's been a case here of elephants dying. They've been finding corpses all over their national parks, and they've been trying to figure this out. They sent samples to South Africa, funny enough. Just again, South Africa is the most industrialized economy in Africa, so they've got labs where they can test blood samples of these animals. They also sent them over to Canada as well to see see what's going on. But more of these animals keep dying. Now, the thing is, the impact here is that if they're still trying to figure out what is happening, and they want to make sure this doesn't spread to other wildlife because of the importance of tourism to Botswana. I think we have the Botswana GDP up here. If we can pull up some figures for what tourism means. Okay, so this is a chart showing that they brought in about $575 million in 2018. That's just direct revenue from tourism. But if we skip over to here we go. If we look at it, tourism grew by 3.4% as at 2018 in Botswana. The average for sub-Saharan Africa tourism growth was 3.3%. Again, the data as of 2018. Now, the previous chart said, you know, they brought in $570 million. But if you look at the wider ecosystem as to what tourism has contributed to Botswana's economy, it's in the range of $2.5 billion, again, as at the 2018 period. It supported 84,000 jobs. 84,000 jobs, you know, is converted to about 8.9% of total employment to the nation. So, and wildlife is a big reason for that. So Botswana is landlocked, of course, but there's a lot of species of wildlife there. It's a big attraction with regards to the amount of visitors that they get. So if they don't figure out what's killing all these elephants and it spreads to other wildlife, you know, they also told people to stay away from the carcasses, not to have, you know, they don't know if it's a virus, they don't know what it is. But the tourism sector, wildlife, the safari parks, very important to the nation. So hopefully they can figure it out. But there is something to be said about them sending those lab samples to South Africa and to Canada. This is something that if we had the facilities here, we should be collecting all these samples and studying them for various countries around the world. That's a revenue generator. And we want to see something like that hopefully produced if we have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and African countries working with each other to test samples and do all these other things. And so that's our Africa Business Update.
You've actually ruined my morning. I'm sorry, Dr. Abati. I just have to say, Rotus, I avoided that story because I hope you know elephants are my favorite animal. I think that story is so upsetting.
It is.
And there you are, and then you now like linger. This is the thing. They're
the most intelligent.
Then you now linger on the dead elephant.
I'm sorry, just to let the viewers know how serious it is. I'm sorry, Tundun. I'm sorry. I'll get you a stuffed elephant maybe before the segment is over.
Anyway, Rotus, if you can have a little time to interrogate some of the issues. You say you are going to have Timmy Silva on your program at 3 o'clock.
Fingers crossed,
Some of the questions you should ask him. Do we really have a deregulation of the downstream sector? Because he's been talking about market forces and all of that.
Yes.
And there are stakeholders in that industry who are not really sure that what we have is real deregulation.
Yes.
That's one question. The second question is, look, under the Jonathan administration, an attempt was made to deregulate the downstream sector. That was opposed by the opposition party. But now the opposition party is saying and claiming that it is doing exactly the same thing.
Yes.
What are we dealing with here? Is it hypocrisy? And then third, I mean, we say we have deregulated the downstream sector and market forces are at play. But at the same time, it doesn't look like the Nigerian government has created a level playing field. Right. You have the NNPC muzzling the private investors in that downstream sector out of the space. And this, you know, these investors, they took money from the banks, they are paying high interest rates, and you have NNPC with its mega stations almost exercising a monopoly. Right. I think these are some of the questions that you will need to ask him. And then these market realities that we talk about all the time through PPPRA. Now, those market realities, where is the other side of the equation with regard to the protest by the Nigerian Labour Congress, saying that, look, we can't have oil resources and we will be refining abroad. Right. What is the state of our refineries? These are issues that I think that the Minister of State should address.
I will. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rotus. And now we have a global business update from Michael Wilson, who's joining us from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Let's go to good morning. To Asia first. Then Japanese shares fell overnight. There's been a fresh spike in coronavirus cases. 65,000 of new ones reported across the United States. That's the largest single day total, and that sad statistic. Nikkei down about 0.25%. As a result of that spike, and as a result of the continuing pandemic, Wells Fargo, that's one of the largest employers in US banks, is preparing to cut thousands of jobs starting later this year. And that really sets a very bleak precedent for an industry which has been under considerable pressure, particularly in its customer-facing operations. So just yesterday's jobs figures, just let me recap those for you. So fewer Americans actually applied for unemployment benefit last week, but you should actually add into that the fact there are now 18 million people in the United States still claiming benefits. Companies like United Airlines, we did that yesterday, didn't we? Warning of massive cuts by October and so on. There's been a bit of reopening, but generally speaking, any recovery from what we're going through at the moment as far as the United States is concerned seems quite a long way away. So the S&P 500 and the Dow dropped, but the Nasdaq did not, and technical tech stocks on the Nasdaq registered another record closing high yesterday. I take a bit of comfort from that because next week is going to be horrible. Let me explain why. Because it's the second quarter earnings season, and none of those results, I suspect, will make particularly pretty reading. S&P 500 companies, that's the most generalized exchange in the United States, are expected to post the biggest quarterly decline in earnings since the 2008 financial crisis. So therefore, as far as Europe was concerned, pretty mixed, and certainly that downside to the Wall Street opening hit the closing because of the time difference, obviously, of stocks here. And there's a growing feeling that things are going backwards, really, in terms of the health emergency throughout the world. COVID-19 is going to be hanging around for a very long time, and policymakers, once again, have to answer this really difficult question, which we've touched on before. How on earth do you have an economy which is functioning, but also you're looking after the safety and the health of your populations? Hence, stock markets have moved down, and the FTSE, for one, will end the week on a negative note. Doesn't really matter what happens today. I don't think there'll be a lot of it because people, unless they're very stupid, will be looking forward to next week and that second quarter earnings season I was talking about. As far as the UK is concerned, just a couple of things. Yes, we touched on this huge debt that we've run up, $350 billion. That's huge in terms of our GDP. As far as the trade talks with the EU are concerned, this is an important one for the rest of the world. It was suggested that the EU will have a sort of time-limited, as they put it, access to London's financial infrastructure. Don't make any mistake about it. The world needs London because, A, of its time frame, and B, because of its clearinghouses as well. And obviously Europe wants to safeguard itself and its financial operations. UK and Turkey are apparently close to agreeing a trade agreement. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Turkey. It's a curious country, and as much as it's been trying for a very long time to become a member of the EU, Germany, the biggest member of the EU, has been a strident opponent of Turkey joining. They blame its human rights record. I'm certain they do. They also don't want a cheap manufacturing competitor on the outskirts of the European borders, which Turkey actually is. But we are close to signing, apparently, a trade agreement with them to help our way through Brexit. Big retailers, I wonder if you know these names, I'm certain you do. John Lewis, Boots and Burger King, between them laying off 7,000 people yesterday. And this is an important thing as far as retailers are concerned. They call these companies anchors. Basically, if you've got a Boots or a Marks & Spencer's even, or a John Lewis on your shopping development, those kind of well-known shops tend to attract other retailers as well. Now that's a big turnaround there. A bit more from Wirecard. You remember that financial services company that collapsed? It was bigger than Deutsche Bank in Germany. A lot of people picking over the bones of that company. The latest is apparently one of their executives coming to London talking about secret documents that he had about Russian chemical weapons and bragging about his ties to the intelligence services. It just goes on and on and on. And finally, commodities. Gold is bought in dollars, and if the dollar weakens, then the gold does too. And it was hit by a jump in the currency. In other words, the dollar went up, so gold becomes more expensive. Gold's been pushing higher, so a bit of a leg back, but only a little one. I think I think the word from the market is that they're heading for $2,000 an ounce. I would not place a great deal of credence in that. Do not bet the ranch about that, but that's the kind of chat at the moment. And oil, finally, yes, you're going to be talking to the oil minister, aren't you, later on, I think, or at least Rotus is. There are fears about the health crisis, really just a down push on oil because health crisis, lack of demand, lack of oil price. That's the global look as we have it.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael Woolsey, for that. I want to talk on John Lewis and Boots this morning because they are retail outlets. They're supposed to be the barometer of society as regards jobs. Despite the furlough scheme, John Lewis is talking about losing about 3,000 jobs, while Boots, the pharmacist, is talking about losing 1,000 jobs. Is it that the furlough scheme did not work?
No, I think what these companies are doing is saying that the demand for their services is actually falling away, and therefore they're reacting as you would expect them to do so. I think John Lewis drew up about 30 or 40 shops through the UK that they said they were going to close. That's an important company, as you say, mainly because they talk about their staff as being colleagues. In other words, they all have a share in the company and they all get part of the company itself. Boots, very old company, started in Nottingham many years ago, a stalwart of the high street, and still, if a company like that is saying the going is getting tough, then it is. I'm not altogether sure that these companies aren't due for a bit of a spring cleaning, if you like, but I mean that's really a job for them. But yes, you're absolutely right. When those companies start to pull out, then that is a sad barometer of what's actually happening in the country.
Well, very quickly, if you can respond to that quickly. How strategic is the trade deal being expected between the UK and Turkey? Do you think that it will happen?
Yes, I do. I think it will happen. I think Turkey is quite anxious to expand its manufacturing base. They're very, and also its agricultural base as well. And I think if trade talks and there's some kind of bilateral trade agreement were to happen between the two countries, it will be quite good. As I say, it's a peculiar country, and as much as you know, it faces two ways. It faces into Europe, and it also faces towards Asia as well. So in terms of a bridgehead for trade, it's very important indeed. From all the noise yesterday around this meeting, it all sounded very positive.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much, Michael Wilson.
We're now being joined by Aaron Akirejala for an update on the COVID-19 pandemic. Good morning, Aaron.
Yeah, good morning, Tundun. I must actually say, always looking as elegant as ever. Good morning to you, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. It's good to see you today. And let's get straight into the matter today. And we've been looking at how the numbers have actually been growing around the world at the moment. We've been saying that they've been growing exponentially by 200,000 in several number of days. And looking at the world figure today, as of today, we do have 12,268,630 number of COVID-19 cases, and the global death stands at 554,953. But at the moment, let's try to break some of the things and put it in context, understanding that it took 149 days to reach the first 6 million cases, but it's only taking just 39 days to add another 6 million to that. Because at the moment, we have well over 12 million, and it has been growing at a rate that is frightening the World Health Organization, and they've been speaking to world leaders and been admonishing world leaders to be very cautious, put party politics aside, put petty politics aside, and actually do the right thing. Right now, they have instituted a committee, an investigative committee, being headed by the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, talking about Helen Clark, and our own South Africa, our own Liberia's former president, talking about Helen Johnson Sirleaf. So they'll be heading a committee that will be looking into the origins of this virus, and alongside the handling of the WHO in response to this pandemic that is still gripping the world at the moment. So let's see what becomes of that. Remember, Helen Clark has been known for her ruthless administration during her time in New Zealand between 1999 and 2008, where she was Prime Minister. At the moment, she's still a mentor to Jacinda Ardern, who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand as we speak. So she's been playing a very crucial role. even in the UN, and for Ellen Justice Sirleaf, we knew what she did during the time at the outbreak of Ebola and how she helped escape Liberia from that Ebola crisis. So this seems to be the right people, independent in nature. We are hoping they can do a thorough investigation, although Helen Clark is saying that this is one of our toughest tasks, understanding that she would have to travel as far as possible, going to the origins in China and try to find out how did this get started for real. And more importantly, put the WHO into the microscope and find out, have they handled this properly? We're hoping to get a report, as Tedros Ghebreyesus, the DG of the WHO, has said that this will not be a report that will be shelved, but rather it will be a report that will be made known and will be used as a case study for years to come. So we're looking forward to that. But at the moment, we're even seeing more world leaders, like the Bolivian president, the interim Bolivian president, at the moment, talking about Janine Áñez. Yes, Janine Áñez, right, has gone down. That was her speech yesterday, talking about the fact that she has actually come down with COVID-19. And also, Venezuela's second in command and the leader of the Socialist Party, also Diosdado Capello, has also...
Capello.
Yeah, Capello, I beg your pardon.
Capello.
Yes, he has also said that he too is down with COVID-19. We're beginning to see world leaders actually experience this. Remember, in Latin America, just a few days ago, we spoke about Jair Bolsonaro and the fact that he too tested positive to COVID-19. And what is happening in Latin America is very, very fearful, understanding that they only just account for 8% of the world's population. But at the moment, we've just said that the world's death toll in terms of COVID-19 is standing at 550. 120,000 of those 550,000 is from Latin America, with the likes of Brazil. We've spoken about how things are, over 1.7 million cases, the likes of Mexico, the likes of Chile, the likes of Peru, leading the surge in number of cases. They've been looking for a way to contain this, but at the moment it's looking like it's getting the better of them. Over 3 million cases alone in Latin America, which is kind of fearful, understanding that they are even saying that there are a lot of underreporting happening in that particular region, that the number could be twice as much as what is officially being reported there. And before we actually come to you guys, bringing it home to South Africa with what is happening there, the only silver lining for South Africa at the moment is the fact that no country in the African region is testing as many people as South Africa. Because at the moment, you can see that well over 2 million tests have been conducted in South Africa, of which 238,339 have been positive, have come back positive. But yesterday alone, we had 13,674 tests, which is a new high for South Africa. The deaths have been low because Egypt is experiencing more deaths than South Africa, but South Africa are experiencing more numbers. The Western Cape Coast, the Western Cape region, the Eastern Cape region, and also not forgetting some critical regions, the Limpopo region, also KwaZulu-Natal, are seeing very, very high numbers at the moment. The health minister is pleading with the nation right now that they need to take their destiny into their own hands, that the storm is coming. He's not saying that if the storm has come, that the worst is coming, that they will need to be more cautious about the way they go about life, unless the worst might really happen to South Africa.
This is very scary. I appreciate the self-accountability that the WHO is displaying with this report that's going to be generated and the kind of people that they've chosen to head it. Because at the moment, the credibility of the WHO, we have to say, is shattered. It's in complete shreds.
Yes.
So that's good.
Well, I think the point about one strong point that you have made this morning is how COVID-19 is egalitarian, how it is not a respecter of persons or status. Now, you've mentioned the example of Diosdado Capello, who has come down with COVID-19, Janine Áñez, who took over from Evo Morales when Evo Morales was pushed into exile from Bolivia. And also yesterday we talked about Jair Bolsonaro. Before then, we had the example of Pierre Nkurunziza of Burundi. These are world leaders. And then, of course, in Europe, you had also leaders who came down with COVID-19, including the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Now, what it means is that we should take a cue from this, that, look, this COVID-19 is not a respecter of persons. It doesn't matter how important you are. You could come down with it. And in Nigeria, we've seen examples of many governors, about 6, 7 of them, being infected with COVID-19. Also, about schools, that's one of the issues that came up yesterday. Hong Kong had reopened their schools, but Hong Kong now is saying that from Monday, schools will be shut down because Hong Kong witnessed a sudden spike in the number of COVID-19 infections. And then in Australia, in the state of Victoria, they are also trying to shut down. It's the second largest state in Australia. And they're saying that, look, we will not allow people to come in. And then they are also reducing the number of people who can come back into the country from elsewhere, just to be careful. What I take from all of this is that, look, in Africa, we should be monitoring what is going on in some of these other countries and try to learn lessons. But the good news you brought yesterday was the fact that at least in Nigeria, the reopening of schools has been suspended, except in one state, Oyo State. And I hope that the governor of Oyo State will pay very close attention to any sudden spike in the positivity rate in his state and take appropriate steps. It's not about ego. This thing is not about ego, you know. Thank you, Aaron.
Yes, I want to say, but just before I go, at the moment, it's a wrong idea to say schools should be open. We know we want to get children back into school, but at the moment, it's still touch and go in terms of COVID-19. Since we're still trying to wrap our heads around it, opening of schools, it might just become a super spreader for COVID-19, and we don't want any of that to happen.
Thank you, Aaron.
All right.
Thank you very much.